On Maybank holiday weekend, the British Championship makes one of 2 visits to Gurston Down on the fast and sweeping farmland course owned by the Hitchings Partnership. As ever, the meeting kicks off with the modified production car classes, so let's join local mini expert Steve Harris. Off the start line and we're into Gurston's unique downhill start chute and heading for Hollow Bend. Steve lifts slightly for this long left-hander that the big single-seaters approach at well over 130 miles an hour. Now he's back on the power through the long sweeper and into the tricky carousel complex. Down to second, up the steep hill and into first for the tightest part of the course. Now the mini crests deer leap and charges into the Ashes left-hander. It's a long uphill haul from here to the finish, so it's essential to get a fast exit from this important final bend. Full power again over Burke's Rise and the finish is in sight. Just 1,057 yards after leaving the start, we're over the finish line and heading for the top holding paddock. Gurston regular Anthony Orchard has had his eye on Brodie Branch's 1400cc sports car record for some time. This is an all-action run in the Westfield Megabusa, using all the road and more at Ashes. It's a personal best for Orchard, but he falls short of his target by just a quarter of a second. Well, if anyone can break that record today, it's this man. Andrew Griffiths has dominated the class for the past year in his Caterham Hayabusa and does so again at Gurston. It's the first class record of the day as he blitzes the old mark by the best part of half a second. Ralph Pinder's on something of a winning streak too. Although Richard Marshall's 7-year-old record remains safe, another win for Pinder keeps the Peugeot mark to the fore in the 2-litre saloon car class. At 16 years of age, young David Warburton is on a steep learning curve. Not yet old enough to hold a road licence, David's really in at the deep end in this sort of company. Back in the paddock, James Wills found out more.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm down here in the paddock with the youngest man currently in British hill climbing, David Warburton. 16 years old, David, and it's your first experience of driving a car.
Oh yeah, it is pretty tough at the minute. I'm having to learn everything from scratch in a race car. The only time I've ever had before in a race car was at the Trafford Centre car park, so you know, it is pretty tough. Yeah, for sure, but you're getting to grips with it pretty quickly, getting close to your dad's times now, 4 or 5 seconds between you at most venues. Oh yeah, definitely. I'm given a target each meeting and I've beaten pretty much every target I've had and maybe beaten it by a couple of seconds, so yeah, I've been happy with my progress so far. Good stuff, so you're keeping the car on track nicely and pulling some good lines out. Oh, we had one off at Prescott at Pardon, which was a little bit annoying, but you know, things happen, don't they? That's right. It's all part of the learning process. Yeah. So, but understand there's a junior championship within the British series, and it's looking pretty good for you in that series. At the moment. Yeah, it is. It's a good one to win because you get free entry next year for 3 Midland meetings, so it's definitely worth going for. Definitely, the dosh is very well received there. I guess. Definitely. I won't be getting any of it, but straight back to Dad, and exactly. He'll. Good stuff. Well, you've certainly got a good guy to learn from there with Alan. He's going to teach you a lot, I'm sure, and we'll watch your progress with interest. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Cheers, David. Back to you, Jerry.
Thanks, James. There aren't many Metro 6R4s in hill climbing these days, but this is one of the fastest. The Tipperdale 4100 6R4 of Tim Painter and Andy Fraser was completely rebuilt in the mid-80s to the ultimate international spec, with a 420 brake horsepower, 24-valve V6 engine and Kevlar carbon fibre bodywork. It's 4-wheel drive, of course, and like all the former Group B rally cars, which were finally outlawed in the mid-80s, it runs in the Sports Libre class on the hills. Tim and Andy have run the car at most of the hill climb venues in the southwest, and for many years it was a flagship car at Longleat Hill Climb, which was supported by Tim's Builders Merchants company, Tipperdale. Another rapid sports Libre machine is British Hill Climb Championship sponsor Mike Ending's Puma Gould. With well over 700 horsepower on tap at full boost, this turbocharged 4-wheel drive machine is one of the fastest saloons around. Chris Cannell's Force SR8 is unique among sports Libre cars in that it has 2 engines. A pair of Hayabusa bike units mounted end-to-end across the back of the chassis make it effectively a straight 8 machine. But for sheer innovation, this car is hard to beat. Nick Mann's 4-wheel drive Manic BT has a turbocharged Cosworth power unit with a gas turbine shoehorned in alongside to eliminate turbo lag. At the other end of the scale, the immaculate Lotus 22 of historic class winner Jeff Hunt, originally built as a hill climb car for Tom Hilton, shows how things were in the early 60s. Motorsport journalist Simon Taylor's HWM was also running in the historic class.
Simon, it's a car that's got quite a history, I think.
Well, I think it does qualify as historically interesting. It was originally a Formula 2 car built in 1950, was raced in Europe by the young Stirling Moss, won its own share of races. It was then converted into a sports car, ended up in Hollywood for Kirk Douglas to drive in a 20th Century Fox movie. And when the film people had finished with it, it was then sold to an American racer who put a big V8 Chevrolet engine in it.
Okay.
So it's now in the form that it's been for about 53 years with the big engine in, and it's been raced pretty much all its life.
Excellent. With that big V8 in there, it must be quite a lively bit of kit.
Well, it is. I mean, the suspension is basically 59 years old. It's not very sophisticated by modern standards. But that's part of the fun. You know, if you drive a historic car, then you take on board the limitations of that car and you drive to those limitations. And the car is certainly much better than the driver, so it gives me plenty to think about.
For sure, keeps you on your toes a little
Absolutely.
bit. But you travel far and wide with the car and exercise it on a regular basis. You've just got back from Australia.
Well, I have. I'm too old and too ugly to fiddle around with trailers and tow cars. I just like to drive the car on the road to and from events, and it's just about marginally road legal, so I can get away with that. And I was invited to go to Phillip Island, where they have a wonderful historic race meeting every March. The Australians were very hospitable. It was a wonderful race meeting. We then stayed on for a couple of weeks and also took part in an event before the Formula One Grand Prix at Albert Park in Melbourne. So it was a great trip. The cars just got back out of the container, still got a bit of Australian dust on it. But fortunately, it seems to have done its 11,500 miles at sea without any damage.
It's come back safely.
Absolutely,
And no problem.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's going well for you today. Currently leading the class, but not sure if it's going to stay that way.
I mean, I'm in the same class. I mean, historically interesting is a sort of interesting portmanteau class, and I'm up against a couple of very quick single-seaters. One of them got it a bit crossed up on his first run, and I'm sure he's going to beat me on the second run. But the great thing about hill climbing is what really matters is the time that you do. If you keep coming back to the same hill, you know what your personal best is.
Right, keep chipping
and
away.
regardless of what anybody else is doing, whether you're slowest or fastest, what is really exciting is if you can actually exceed your own personal best, and that's really where the fun of hill climbing comes for me.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you the best this afternoon,
you
and
very
we'll
much.
certainly be watching it. Let's
Thanks
go
a
back
lot.
to Jerry and have a look at the run.
So Simon sits on the line aboard the massive HWM Chevrolet, knowing that he'll need a maximum effort to stay ahead of those three single-seaters snapping at his heels. The 6-litre V8 bellows down the hill into hollow, and Simon coaxes the big car through the long left-hander. The ultimate enthusiast, he drives a Stovebolt Special, as it was dubbed in America, to events on the road. But now comes the hard work as he muscles the car up into carousel. No limited slip diff here as the inside rear wheel spins under full throttle and the car bounds up the hill into ashes. Big handfuls of opposite lock on the exit, and Taylor powers the Stovebolt up over Burke's Rise. The finish line's in sight and the big car blasts between the timing beams. Well, he didn't quite match his first run time, and the three single-seaters slipped through. But for Simon, it's still mission accomplished in terms of sheer enjoyment. We saw Harewood expert James Blackmore in part 2, but with the airline pilot now living in Hampshire, Gurston Down is his local hill. He won outright here in April, but with hard chargers Iron Price and Will Hall on hand, he'll have his work cut out today. Here's Hall now, and he doesn't disappoint the crowds. In another pitch battle with Iron Price, he falls just 0.02 of a second short of the Welshman's class-leading time after the first runs. Einan psychs himself up on the start line, knowing that nothing less than maximum effort will do to secure the class win from his rival today. But then he never gives anything less, and the Ford rockets up through the gears and into hollow with only the suggestion of a lift. Into the braking area for carousel, and Price goes back down the box at lightning speed for the tricky centre section. This is a typical all-action run from Einan, and as the car powers out of ashes and up the steep climb to the finish, he's on course for another win. Now let's go back to the paddock and catch up with James.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm here with Steve Broughton of SBD, driver of the SBD OMS, a new car to British hill climbing today. Steve, it's got quite an interesting engine installation in it.
Yes, it's a new supercharger project we've been working on. We decided that a lot of the engines were getting quite expensive to run, and I thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's see what we can do. So we literally took a standard Hayabusa engine, nothing internally changed on the engine, and put a supercharger on the outside. made all the components up to mount it, and simply programmed it.
Okay, so it's a good way of gaining some power with not necessarily huge cost then.
Exactly.
Well, your speed trap times are certainly very competitive in the class, that's for sure, so it's obviously really is producing a number. How are you getting to grips with the difference between the hill climbs and the sprints?
A lot less room to play with. I'm used to sort of much higher speeds, but you've got the room to slide the car at high speed. We're here, if you're an inch out of line, you're in the grass and maybe even further away from the track.
You've really got to have a lot of faith in the front end of the car for this game then.
Exactly. And I think there's nothing like knowledge and keep practicing the same track.
Absolutely.
To get the feel for exactly what's right, the right braking points, which I'm picking them up slowly. My main aim for this weekend was to get into a 29, which I've done already. More than happy with that. Might even be able to go a bit faster later on.
Brilliant.
But we'll just see. It just seems to work really nicely.
Sounds good. Well, it's certainly an exciting car, new to the 2 litre class, and we'll watch its progress with interest. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, Jerry.
Steve Broughton has sponsored the British Sprint Championship for the past 5 years and currently lies third overall in that series. As he said, sprint courses, mainly on race circuits, are a little different to the confines of Gurston downhill climb. But Steve's going well today and sharing the SBD OMS with constructor Steve Owen, who brought it home in 4th place in the 2 litre class. We're back shortly with more British Hill Climb action.